Hi, good morning. Welcome everybody to our webinar, AP Automation, your first line of defence against fraud. We've got a few attendees in already. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes whilst we wait for a few more people to join. Just to give you a brief introduction whilst we're waiting for people, we've got David Bradshaw on the call and Robert Brooker. David works for Documation. He's worked here for 20 years and across all different departments, but currently part of the listening team. And is a solutions expert. And Robert is currently working, he's a director at Opus Advisory Group, and he's our cyber fraud specialist. People might have seen him speaking before. He's a familiar face across the fraud landscape in the good side of fraud, telling us how to avoid it rather than anything else. Yeah, we're really delighted to welcome him today. We've got a few more people on, so I think we'll kick off now. And I'm Julia. I'm head of marketing at Documation, and I'm hosting the event for you and kind of making sure we cover everything we need to cover in the short amount of time. There will be time for questions at the end if anyone has any, or if not, feel free just to get in touch. Listening team at documation.co.uk, and any questions for Rob we can pass on to him. Okay, so basically the first question really is, what are the different types of financial fraud that affect AP teams? And I think, Rob, that's a good one for you.
It certainly is. Thank you very much indeed to Automation and to yourself, Julia, for inviting me. Thank you for joining us today, which hopefully we could throw a bit of light on where are you with the fraud landscape and what does it look like and where are we going with fraud. Unfortunately, it's a growing industry. Many industries are struggling at the moment, but fraud, as Julia said, I'm on the right side of it, but it is a fine line. And fraudsters are always a step or two ahead of us. So what are we seeing? And obviously technology plays a lot of this now. Really does play a big place in what we do, obviously, in what Automation, the APA solution provider of the year, provide. But what are we seeing? So you're handling millions of transactions on a daily basis, and the sophistication of fraudsters is obviously always there to try and beat you and detect fraud and create fraud. What does that mean? Well, you've got four main categories, really, I suppose, for yourselves. And understanding cybercrime is the first step. Do you understand what it means to you as an organisation and what you can do about it? And we always talk about invoice fraud, and we always talk about fake, inflated by vendors or even fake suppliers. I'm sure you've all had invoices that aren't really from the company they portray to be. And all they're trying to do is obviously get services or even the goods delivered elsewhere and divert where the goods get delivered. And they infiltrate your system or they create those fake suppliers. Always look out for aggregating if you have the insider threat, and whereby somebody has a limit of, say, £1,000 and you'll get 3 or 4 payments through for £999. Payment fraud, unauthorized changes to payment details. This is a growing area, sadly, and I'm seeing it day in, day out. I'm old enough to remember when this used to be a letter, and it's now an email address, okay? And what you get is obviously bank account details notifying you that the supplier's bank account details are changing. And all that means is that's from the fraudster. The fraudster intervenes, they send you an email purporting to be from one of your suppliers, and ultimately telling you a change of bank account details. You pay the next invoice, and the first time you know about it is when the company contact you, say we haven't been paid for invoice dated XYZ. Sadly, what then happens is you realise that money's gone to the fraudsters. So get a process in place to make sure that you relate to everything from original paperwork. Don't act upon any email. And then we've got collusion, and I'm afraid the minute you've got employees, you've got the insider risk. That's not a very nice thing to think, but there's always that fear of it. And there's two types of fraudster, the need and the greed. The greed is obviously those who just want more money to live their life, whether that be, and sadly, addiction plays a big part in this, and particularly since COVID, with the gambling and the fact everybody's got online accounts. In addition to that is the need. And at the moment, we're seeing it. We've had the energy crisis. We're all sitting here worrying about the budget and what does that mean for us? And what does that mean? It means putting bread on the table, a roof your head. So your staff are always looking potentially, what can they do? Then the outside of that is those people on the outside who need somebody on the inside, and they basically collude with them to be able to commit that fraud. A lot of the time, a fraudster needs somebody on the inside. So that might be misappropriation, that might be accepting the fact that you're going to send stuff to goods or services to a different address. It might be that they just basically, regarding the bank fraud, the bank mandate fraud, it might be that they social engineer your team and your staff, because what they're doing is building up that rapport to get your confidence, and then they will then say, you'll say, that's okay, I know that guy, we know about that firm and changed bank account details, he's just been on holiday, we've had this conversation. And that's how they do it. Obviously then we have procurement fraud and manipulating the process, inflating costs, creating ghost suppliers, siphon off funds, and we see that a lot. I've worked at TfL as head of fraud there, and as you can imagine, procurement played a big part in what we did. And ultimately, what does that mean? So many different areas for people. They realise the minute they've got foot in the door with some of you as organisations, they're getting work for life. And therefore, what you'll see is sometimes I've seen on the procurement is not only the inflating costs or ghost suppliers or even ghost employees, and they're getting the money back from you. It's whereby they lowball. They'll come in very, very low on a contract, and then you'll get variation after variation after variation the minute you appoint them. And that's always a concern. What is that variation? Do we have any evidence of it? And can we spot that from that side of it? And what does that mean to you in the payable side? Question these variations. Please don't just be paying them. It's up to us to all speak up and realise what we're doing. So there's an outline, if you like, of fraud attempts being made at the moment, making life for you as the AP team really difficult, especially if you're working with manual processes. The high volume of invoices that you are processing on a daily basis, combined with insufficient verification, makes it really difficult to spot. So please have really a think about that.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so that sort of, I think I've counted 4 main headers there in the different types of fraud. David, how does automation help prevent it?
Yeah, that's a good overview there from Rob. So I think AP automation, one thing I'd start by saying is it positions itself as one of the most effective ways to prevent fraud and detect it. Ultimately, you want to protect your business from financial loss, but also reputational damage in some cases. So with those manual AP processes, there's lots of vulnerabilities, as we just touched on there, and automation can address those in a number of ways. One of those would be enhanced invoice verification. So with intelligent document and data capture, which is powered by AI, what an automation solution can do is verify the data on the invoice. So we can look at the company name and address, make sure it's who we expect it to be from. We are looking at bank details. So those quoted on the invoice, do they match the vendor master data? Is the PO a valid purchase order, and is it for that supplier? Or is the invoice a duplicate and might be trying to get double payment there? So any of those anomalies right at the beginning when we're capturing data, we can pick that up, and essentially an automation solution, it can be configured to route those invoices back to the supplier, maybe ask to resubmit them, or it might go to the AP team for them to check. But once we have that data, an automation solution can then look at doing a 3-way match. So that's the invoice against the purchase order and the receipts. So typically, we'd expect there to be an exact match there, certainly within your tolerances as a business. So any discrepancies that are flagged up can be handled by workflow. So an automation solution can manage those exceptions and make sure they're delivered to the right people in the business to be worked on. Ultimately, what we're ensuring is that only valid and approved invoices are being paid. Now, for non-PO, it's a bit different. We need invoices to be coded and approved. So with AI playing a part, when an invoice is delivered to somebody to code it, we want to assist them and use intelligence behind that to make sure the right codes are selected for that part of the business. And then when it's being approved, we take a delegation of authority and make sure that the right people are receiving the invoice for approval, but it's also within their sign-off limits. Okay, so it's really all about control and putting your business rules in place, and avoiding those manual pushing paper around the office, because it's all AI powered as well, the workflow, any actions that users take, it remembers that and it will streamline that for future processing as well. Now, earlier Rob touched on a few things. So segregation of duties is absolutely important. An automation solution is in place to ensure that different tasks are carried out by different people in the business. So we don't want someone approving and paying an invoice. We want to separate that out, or at the very least introduce a second person that has to check it before payment is made. So that's really important, and it kind of touches on visibility as well and transparency. So automation provides a full audit trail of everything that happens on a document, and whether it's viewed, whether it's changed, or who it's coded by or approved. If there's any match exceptions that have been dealt with, absolutely everything is recorded and logged, so that you can go back and investigate something if you need to, and you have absolutely everything you need there at your fingertips. But also it can act as a deterrent for that internal fraud. If people know that things are being tracked to that level of detail, then it's a good deterrent. And the last point I'll make is vendor validation. With automation solutions, quite often you'll have supplier onboarding workflow included. So why not take that and make use of it, and make sure any new supplier that you're bringing into the business, you're collecting all the right documentation and the right data, that's being reviewed and approved, and then it can be created in your vendor master data after that. What that allows is you've got that full control of the process, but also if any invoices are received from unfamiliar entities or someone that's unauthorized, that can be flagged early on and picked up. And again, payments that are potentially fraudulent.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Dave. You touched a few times in that on how AI plays a part in this prevention. Is there anything more you could say about that?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence, it's scattered throughout all that workflow I just mentioned and all the tools that sit behind that. But it actually adds another layer of security as well and protection. So AI can continuously learn and improve its ability to detect fraudulent activity. And it does that in a number of ways. So one of them would be anomaly detection. So typically AI can learn spending patterns, and it can flag unusual activity such as payments to new vendors, abnormal invoice amounts, unusual transaction times, or even if payment methods are being changed. So it can just assess what's going on in the business and flag anything that's unusual or suspect. It's often done in real time as well. So we're looking to prevent fraudulent payments before they actually occur. One other area is predictive analysis. So machine learning that sits behind and aids the AI, and that can predict fraudulent risks and activity by looking at all your historical data. So what it's doing there is trying to find patterns that could be fraudulent. And as time goes on, it gets smarter and it refines the way it does that. And one last area would be advanced data correlation. So AI tools, they're extremely powerful. They can scan and assess large amounts of data very quickly. So why not use that to correlate different data points? So you might have all your historic spend with a supplier compared to current day spend with that supplier. And it can assess all of that data, and it can look for patterns and try and find if there's anything there that could be fraudulent. That's often missed by a manual review just because of the amount of data you're dealing with. So why not use AI to leverage that?
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, fascinating. And Rob, going back to you, we talked about how sort of the fraud, cyber crimes always developing and evolving. What are the new frauds on the block, so to speak? What should we be looking out for at the moment?
Thanks, Julian. I just want to pick up on something David mentioned to give you an example of a case I've investigated with regards to that segregation of duties with regards to a guy who worked in a professional services firm, very similar to myself. And he was a contractor, so just a temporary member of staff, and was given autonomy around accounts payable, accounts receivable. And he kept seeing loads of invoices coming through, and then he saw partners payments going out and the ridiculous amount of noughts on the end of it, etc., etc. You'll note I'm a director and not a partner. But ultimately, what he did was when he saw these coming through, he realised there was an awful lot of couriers being used, an awful lot of chauffeurs and taxis. So he just created fake invoices to the tune over a 17-month period of 250,000 quid. And they were all paid. And the steps of a fraudster is they get greedy. So he started small and made them larger and larger over time. On the day he was arrested, let me tell you, the company, i.e. yourselves, was still unaware of that fraud. The reason is he paid £20,000 invoice and it raised the suspicious activity report at the bank. They reported it to the company's bank, who then obviously informed the company and the police got involved. Just to give you an idea, on the day he was arrested, the company are totally unaware. He saw it as a relief and said it was because they can. And I'll tell you now, he had all £250,000 still in his bank account. He'd bought it up as an issue and he was just trying to raise a point and get it. Didn't stop him getting 3 years at what was Her Majesty's pleasure at the time. But just to give you a concept of an idea, it will go under your radar and you're not aware. Let me just tell you the other check that you can do, and these guys have talked about it, is the fact that that money was paid in the same bank account as his wages were being paid into. But that's where we go. So let's look at the new moving feast of fraud. And it is, as I said at the beginning, the growing industry. And as David just alluded to, we can't get away from AI. Let me tell you now, if you're not using it, I promise you now, the fraudsters are. They're already using AI to analyse fraud. I've gone into many serious organised crime gangs at first thing in the morning when with police we've gone through the front door. Let me tell you, they'd set up above a shop, for instance, or a small WeWorks type office place, and they've got laptops all round and they've got whiteboards. And on their whiteboards is their strategy. So as organisations, do we have a strategy? Not to mention the fact, do we have AI? So as it evolves and technology evolves, the techniques are, and the fraudsters are on it before we are. And so what we're seeing at the moment with the emerging fraud types that you need to be aware of is deepfake fraud, which is where they use the technology to mimic the voices or the emails of high-level executives, tricking yourselves into approving large payments to fraudulent accounts. They have a sense of urgency that play on human nature and react quickly without going through the usual checks. Now, we saw this with emails. We called it whale email, CEO email fraud. And what that meant was you'd get an email allegedly from your finance director or from your chief exec saying, can you pay this now? That happened. First of all, take 5. Would he really be emailing you like that? And the way that the language is and the way that he speaks, asking you to pay a payment? Probably not, but I accept we all panic. That's one element of it that's now kind of slowly disappearing. And what we're getting now is where they've recorded the voice because he's spoken at an event, or you can all go on your phones and get an app now where you can change people's voices and make out it's, I don't know, Donald Trump or somebody for a bit of fun. But this can also be used for the fraudsters. So what we're seeing is you're now going to receive a voicemail, a voice note saying, hi, it's the FD, the CEO. Could you please pay invoice 1234 now? I've also emailed you. I've also sent a message on Teams or Yammer, whatever you use. Can you just do it now? Please, please. One big thing. Take 5. Don't do it immediately. Think, is this really going to happen this way? Do I need to be aware of it? The more that we're seeing now is ransomware attacks. Now, ransomware is a really difficult area because obviously you're in a position whereby they are threatening to take down your company data. They'll take down the website, a DDoS type attack, and you won't be able to work. What do? Do you pay the money? Do you not pay the money? Personally, there's not a right or wrong because it all depends on who the organisation are as a fraudster, what they're asking for, how much, when it needs to be paid, etc. What you'll find a lot of time, it's in crypto. But please bear that in mind. The minute you do switch on and you pay them, the chances are they're not just going to disappear. They'll be back very quickly. So they encrypt your data, demand the ransom payments, and then look at your cybersecurity system. So at the same time as you're looking at your fraud piece, please also look at your IT and think about cyber and think about your cybersecurity. We talked a little bit earlier about synthetic identity fraud, and that's creating fake identities using a combination of real and fabricated information to set up fraudulent vendors or submit bogus invoices. And we talked a little bit around that area earlier on. That's one area of real concern, is dormant vendors. So looking at your vendor list, what do you have on there? Do you have them for 2, 3, 4, 5 years where they've just sat dormant? That's where you'll see people committing fraud, because they can pick up a dormant account and they can obviously bill through that and invoice through that, and nobody really is that aware. So please think about that. Think about any dormant accounts that you might have, because they are dangerous and they are literally sitting there waiting for fraud. So that, I appreciate that, again, leads to an insider at the end of the day, but please be aware of it. That is the kind of areas that they're looking to exploit. New types of fraud is essential in keeping defences up to date and ensuring that your processes remain tight and obviously secure. So what else do I think with regards to prevention of fraud and trying to help? There's new legislation coming in called the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act with regards to the failure to prevent fraud. 3 quick areas that you need to, 2 of these 3 criteria you need to be on. If you're not, my advice is still good governance, compliance, training and education, etc. won't do you any harm. But you've got no choice if you're a firm with 250 employees or more, £36 million turnover a year and £18 million on the balance sheet. If you fit 2 of those 3, you are now accountable should fraud happen in your organisation and it has an impact on your senior leadership team and your executive suite. So please think about that. We're waiting for the only defence, which is reasonable procedures. They should be announced this month. But part of that, and I'll just run through it quickly, will be around education, awareness and training, and not just once a year, not just when you join. And let's make sure that we do it. And also, how about your supply chain? How many of you at procurement actually have an element there where you get them all in to tell them what the procurement will be, and you actually mention fraud? So at least people know you're on it from the very beginning. And I really think it's important. I've done that a lot during my career. So education, awareness and training. And then the culture, and that isn't just your chief exec or your MD. Please make sure that's shared across the whole organisation and cascades down. Don't look to one person, but it's got to be everybody's responsibility, and that's the only way you can change the culture and the behaviour. The other is fraud risk assessments. Undertake specific fraud risk assessments across your organisation. Can't rely on your old bribery and corruption ones any longer. They've got to be that. They must be done. So education, awareness and training, fraud risk assessments, and then creating that culture and ensuring that everybody is aware of exactly what fraud is and where can they play a role in helping to prevent and detect it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. That's really great. I think that's pretty much our time done. Unless anyone has any questions, now's the time to stick them in the chat if you have. If you don't have any questions and you think of something afterwards, please do get in touch. listeningteam@documation.co.uk is our email address. You'll get David and I on that address, and we can forward any of those questions to Robert should they need to be, if we can't answer them. But that just leaves me to say thank you both, David and Robert, for your time today and for explaining all that you have and sharing your knowledge with us. It's really great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining.
Bye.
Thank you for the invite. Bye now.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.